And so I suspect, especially now, it makes even more sense because everything we've heard, Friedberg mentioned it a couple of episodes ago, the United States limited partner market is essentially closed for business. They have huge misallocation problems. The endowments are sort of closed. The universities are closed. A lot of the family offices are licking their wounds. And so this is a perfect time for folks in Saudi Arabia and the UAE to basically put the foot on the gas and basically tell everybody, hey, we are open for business. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that it'll be successful. It'll work, especially in a moment now where US dollar flows from US dollar limited partners are very difficult and harder to come by. They're a valuable security partner of the United States. They're a valuable economic partner of the United States. It's no different than doing business with any other country. I think it's smart by the PIF. On the other thing, though, with US firms investing in China's AI, it should not be allowed. And I do think that the folks that are responsible for CFIUS need to get a handle on this. Look, I've done a bunch of deals where I have had to jump through a bunch of CFIUS hoops where...
Explain CFIUS, please.
So basically, CFIUS is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. Now, what that means is if folks want to invest in certain things that are on a list of things, and I'll tell you the things that I've been involved with that came under CFIUS, rocketry and certain chip technologies are so advanced that the United States has very specific rules that limit the ability for foreign actors to invest in those businesses. And in those situations where a few folks invested beside me in some of these companies, we had to go through a process to get CFIUS approval before that investment was allowed. Now, what's interesting about that is that's about money coming in. But I do think that the reverse now becomes important because if US dollars are going to go and seed these extremely complicated advanced technologies abroad, especially into the hands of countries that are frenemies at best of the United States, I think we have a responsibility to have a point of view on that. And so I think Keith Raboy was the one that was very definitive and said this should not be allowed. I do think it is so early. Jason, we talked about this. We're on this curve of fuck around and find out, which means there will be some crazy examples of stuff that are very uncomfortable.
Yep.
I don't think we want US fingerprints on this stuff being perfected outside of US borders. I think New York had a long period of lawlessness where people were afraid to walk down the streets. It took a handful of mayors to draw a hard line in the sand, to increase policing, sometimes to introduce some pretty controversial concepts at the time, or at the time that were supported, which now seem controversial.
You're talking about stop, ask, and frisk.
I think it was called the broken windows theory of policing.
Yep, take care of the little things.
Take care of the little things so that the little things don't compound into the big things. But whatever you believe needs to get done, I think it's pretty clear that what is being done isn't working. And so the real question is, can people see through the naked partisanship to agree that this is not working? And sadly, what I would tell you guys is that I don't think they're there yet. And the reason is because America is the most divided it's ever been, especially on issues of race and social justice and social norms. And I think that crime has gotten caught and painted with that brush, which means that the idea of very aggressive policing and safety are now viewed as opposite and antithetical to social justice. And I don't know how that happened, but the result of it is this, which is these folks will never agree that this is not working. And you'll have to go through recall election after recall election. And even then, it's not going to be enough because the smart politicians will say what they want in terms of like safety matters. But then a lot of voters will vote the opposite. The example in Chicago that David brought up earlier is really interesting because it was essentially a social justice candidate versus a law and order candidate through their Democratic ranks, and the social justice candidate won. The progressive candidate won, and the person that wanted to tax businesses and individuals won, and the person that wanted to sort of focus on law and order lost. So what does that say? It says that we are still in a moment where we can't agree on what is important.
Yep.
That's really scary. And so I think you kind of have to, unfortunately, vote with your feet if you are lucky enough to do so.
I think that's the key. Yeah.
Who's left over are a lot of people who are not in a position to just up and leave. And then they are unfortunately left behind. Nat started a bilingual school, Italian-English, that is on the IB system, International Baccalaureate system. And it's a sister school to a school in the city. We had a fundraiser, which was literally right downtown in that encampment area. And when I pulled up, I was like, is this for real? It's an open air drug market where folks are doing drugs, selling drugs right in front of you. They're passed out, completely incapacitated. About a third of the guys are wearing balaclavas, so you can't identify them. You have no idea what they look like. It feels random. It doesn't feel like there's organized crime, gang crime. Like, I grew up in a pretty crappy neighborhood, and you knew who the gangs were. You knew who the tough guys were. You knew how to avoid trouble. It didn't come and randomly come and stab you to death, right? And so, yeah, Jason, you become street smart growing up in a culture like that because you know how to avoid it. You know how to be alert. This doesn't feel like that. This is just like a bad roll of the dice and you could get stabbed to death just walking down the street. That does not... Where are the politicians to stop this?